On June 29, 2015, a woman was found brutally murdered in her home. Police initially thought it was a robbery gone wrong, but after investigating, they identified two men who then blamed it on a man who was close to the victim. The primary location of this case is Southwest Florida, where Teresa and Mark Sievers resided in Boney Ch with their two daughters Josephine and Carmelo. Teresa and Gray Tottenham were born in Connecticut, USA. She was raised alone by Mother Teresa after her father abandoned the family when she was just 1 month old. She is said to have been a lively, outgoing and cheerful girl surrounded by friends and an excellent student in high school, ranking first in her class. Teresa completed her residency at the University of Florida in 1996 after graduating from medical school. By all professional accounts, Teresa is an exceptionally intelligent and charming physician. She was a well-known holistic therapist working in the health and rehabilitation facility of the Estero Medical Institution. Regarding her personal life, Teresa is reported to have married Kenya Coons in 2000. They met on the internet. After 3 years of marriage, Kenya and Teresa decided to end their union. They had no serious problems and the divorce process went very well. After the divorce, they continued to communicate and remained close friends. Soon after, Teresa became friends with an acupuncturist and introduced Mark to a registered nurse. Their relationship progressed well, and in late 2003, Teresa announced that she was expecting a child. The couple married, and 6 months after the wedding, their first daughter was born. After the birth of their second daughter in 2007, they purchased a house in Bonita Springs, A. Everyone says that Mark and Teresa's marriage was a huge success. According to the man's mother, Mark and Teresa are the epitome of the ideal couple. In addition, everyone could see that the husbands enthusiastically took part in all the events that their daughters organized. In addition, Mark began working in a medical institution where Teresa worked as an administrative employee, although they claimed that they were happy and spent a lot of time together alone. The truth was between them completely different. Mark and Teresa quarreled every day, and it seemed that their marriage was crumbling over time. Their girls were the only ones who saw these arguments. Eventually, the couple decided that they needed to familiarize themselves with the realm of couples exchange. It later became clear that most of their arguments stemmed from the fact that Mark had a much higher sex drive than Teresa, and what she was looking for something that could supposedly ignite the flame and make their relationship stronger. Mark agreed, and they went to similar meetings for several months, telling this whole family story. When the family decided to go on vacation to Connecticut in June 2015, Teresa flew home alone on Sunday, June 28. She landed at Save International Airport in Florida, remembering that her patients came first and that she needed to resume her normal life. On Monday, June 29, 2015, patients were waiting for Teresa at the clinic, but she did not arrive. Mark and his girls decided to stay in Connecticut for a few more days of rest. Teresa's nurse called Mark and said that his wife had not arrived and that they could not talk to her. Despite all the efforts of the medical center staff, the woman did not answer their calls and messages. The nurse advised the guy to go home and check what was happening, but he refused. At first, Mark made it clear that he would call her, but later changed his mind and said that he also could not contact her. Mark turned to a neighbor named Peter Trace for help and not to Teresa's faithful nurse. To check on Teresa, he asked him to go into the house and knock on the door. Having fulfilled this request, the neighbor went outside and knocked on the door. However, receiving no answer from the man, decided to enter through the back entrance. One of the two dogs belonging to the house jumped out of the door when he opened it, and then the neighbor went inside and started calling Teresa. However, upon entering the kitchen, he discovered the most horrifying scene: the body of a woman lying in the center of a pool of blood, her head completely broken, and next to her a bloody hammer. Since this neighbor was a doctor like Teresa, he approached the woman and measured her vital signs. The man then dialed 911, but by then she had already passed away. "What happened to you?" "I'm visiting a friend. He left town, and when I got there I found his wife dead on the floor. She came home last night expecting her husband to come to work at 9 o'clock. But he didn't come, so he called me to ask her make sure that she had a hammer on her side. She was hit on the back of the head, naturally." As soon as the neighbor called the police, they showed up at the house, and when the doctors arrived, they confirmed Teresa's death. After the woman's body was removed from the scene, it was submitted for forensic examination. After a medical examination, It was determined that she had suffered 17 head injuries. There were multiple blows to the head and no other obvious injuries to the body, suggesting that the weapon used there was a hammer. There were also signs of rape. At first the officers believed that it could be something. It's personal, but after studying everything that happened in the house they began to put forward different theories. It dawned on them that the front door had been forced open. It was opened using a crowbar, which was later found in the backyard of the house. Because of this, law enforcement officers began to suspect that the house was most likely broken into by thieves, who discovered that Teresa caught the family in the crime when were they on vacation. The problem with this theory was that there was about $4,000 in cash in the family's safe and nothing of value was taken from the house. This theory was ruled out because the couple had a lot of valuables in plain sight that the alleged thieves were unable to take. They even left Teresa's wallet unattended and only one of her credit cards was missing. Police also chose not to check the woman's husband since he was on vacation with his daughters in Connecticut at the time of the attack and could not have killed her within the first few weeks after the incident. With little evidence, authorities believed the case might be deadlocked. However, following an anonymous phone call, they immediately zeroed in on two men who were living in Missouri at the time. Upon learning of the incident, police began investigating 51-year-old Curtis Wainwright, a computer technician who had striking resemblance to Mark and was his buddy throughout his life, even attended Teresa's funeral. Jimmy Ray Rogers aka Jimmy Young Rutis was the second man the police were looking for. Jimmy met Rutis in prison when he was incarcerated for drug possession. Jimmy was charged with weapons possession. The weekend after the incident, detectives tracked Curtis down and discovered that he had rented a silver Hyundai car that was never returned by police. They found the car parked near the man's trailer. It appears that when officials checked the car's GPS, they also looked into Curtis's trailer. By following the locations indicated by the GPS, detectives were able to piece together the exact route that Curtis and Jimmy took on the morning of June 27. It turned out that he was driving in the direction of the Seavers family home in Florida. The fact that they were together was reported by surveillance cameras in the supermarket, which recorded their purchases of cleaning products, wet wipes, rags, garbage bags, lock-picking kits and other items. They then went to a nearby beach and remained there for a while before heading to Teresa's house, where they remained until early Monday morning. According to the GPS in their car, they drove back to Missouri after the arrest. The guys were questioned at the police department. However, they both categorically denied their involvement in the crime, since Rutis and Jimmy had committed several crimes in the past. They knew well what questions investigators could ask and what traps they could set. This was not the first time they were interrogated. It was difficult to get them to discuss the crime and Jimmy refused to admit that he had done anything to Teresa. Investigators then pressured Jimmy into telling him what his girlfriend, who was interrogated at the same time as him, had told him. The girl claimed that her boyfriend actually killed Teresa in order to work with Sam. When the police asked Jimmy Curtis why he made such a remarkable confession, he replied that it was because Teresa's husband Mark, his friend, asked them to do it. It was Teresa's husband's plan to get rid of her, and he knew full well that he would not be suspected because he was too far away, and that she even helped Jimmy get rid of his bloody clothes. She showed the police the location and they actually found several items of clothing covered in blood. After listening to the girl's confession, Jimmy Curtis eventually decided to come forward. Curtis claims that Mark told him when they first met that he was very upset because Teresa wanted to divorce him and take the girls with her. He also said that he was afraid of never seeing his daughters again because he did not have money to pay for custody, and he was afraid for their safety. However, by this point the police had everything they needed to begin questioning him. He said that he had made every effort but could not save the marriage. In addition, Mark told Curtis that Teresa's death was the only way out of the couple's plight as they were allegedly on the verge of bankruptcy. Mark estimated that he would earn $4.5 million because she had many life insurance policies. The man then asked if he had any connections that could help him. At that time, the police only had Curtis's confession. There was no evidence linking Mark to his wife's murder. Mark allegedly said that whoever did this would receive $100,000 from him. When the man offered this money, Curtis told him that he could handle everything himself. These were Curtis's words against the words of Mark, who behaved like a distraught and grief-stricken husband. But the police had doubts in it from the very beginning of the investigation. When the police began checking the couple's relationship, they discovered that Teresa had several life insurance policies. They also confiscated Mark's cell phone and found a digital diary that he kept almost every day. In this diary, they read that the couple's relationship was not going well and that Teresa was thinking about divorcing him. That he feels like a man not satisfied with his wife in an intimate way, and that he feels like a leech. All the pain and grief that he showed seemed excessive to them, instead of showing. In addition, it turned out that Mark and Curtis used burner phones to communicate so as not to leave records of calls or messages. When the officers checked Mark's personal phone, they saw all the messages of condolence that he had received, and they found it strange that Curtis, who had known Mark since childhood, was present at Teresa's wake and funeral. He did not send him a message of condolences over Teresa's death. Upon learning of this news, Mark wrote in his diary that he felt like a leech because most of the money in the house came from Teresa's work. Added to all this was a statement from Mark's mother. According to her, the day before Teresa's murder, she went inside to see how things were going and to feed the dogs. At Mark's request, she did not turn on the home's security alarm before leaving. Prosecutors claimed that after the investigation was completed in 2016, there was more than 100 pieces of evidence against the man. In February of the same year, Mark was taken into custody and accused of murdering his wife. After Teresa's death and the man's imprisonment, the couple's 2 daughters were handed over to the family of the deceased woman. The court decided that it was preferable for the girls to live with the victim's family, although Mark wanted them to remain under the care of his mother. After this, the father tried to provoke resistance from his daughters to Teresa's family by calling them several times from prison, but to no avail. As a result, the trial of the 3 accused began in 2019. However, the judge stated that each trial would proceed independently, primarily because Curtis was going to testify against Mark and Jimmy in an effort to get a reduced sentence. As a result, the trial of Jimmy Roy Rogers began first, with Curtis acting as the main witness. In this much-anticipated testimony for the prosecution, the guy stated that he could not understand how Teresa could have been killed when he and Jimmy first arrived at the family home. They realized that this was their only chance, so they had to take advantage that day, started looking for what hit Teresa. However, Teresa returned home earlier than they expected, so they had to hide. Curtis claimed that he found a hammer and the man claimed that he took it and hit Teresa in the back while she was in the kitchen with her back turned away from him with the intention of knocking her out. However, when he and Jimmy walked, he came across a bowl of food left by one of the dogs, which made Teresa wary. When she turned around, she saw 2 men in her house. Curtis claims that one of them became very agitated and hit Teresa on the head. The woman lost consciousness on the floor, and he struck her again. Jimmy then hit Teresa several times with a hammer while she was at the end. After all, she didn't stop dying. Curtis also claims that when a neighbor saw Teresa lying in the kitchen, they left the house before the police arrived. Jimmy's defense, on the other hand, wanted the jury to understand that Curtis killed Teresa and that their client never hit her with a hammer. The defense argued that Curtis was an unreliable witness, but this did not affect the jury's verdict, and Jimmy Rogers was sentenced to life in prison. They also argued that Jimmy's childhood was filled with violence and cruelty at the hands of adults in his immediate circle who tried to avoid the harshest punishment. Mark took his place in the dock and Curtis again became the main witness, repeating his previous testimony. During Jimmy's trial, he claimed that Mark came up with the concept and that he was the one who organized everything. Prosecutors also presented additional evidence and the results of their investigations. After all arguments regarding the evidence were completed, the jury deliberated for 4 hours before reaching a unanimous decision. Mark, on the other hand, never made a statement. His lawyer tried to convince the jury that Curtis was the only one who could have caused Teresa's death, that he was an unreliable witness due to his past, and that he was lying to protect himself. Mark was found guilty of both first-degree murder and conspiracy to murder. The jury proposed the death penalty to the court. This proposal was accepted by the judge and Mark received the death sentence. The 51-year-old was subsequently allowed to read a prepared statement in which he maintained his innocence. "My daughters have lost their mother and are about to lose their father. I urge the court to spare my life so as not to add to their loss and suffering." Lawyers said they would appeal the verdict after Mark read the statement. In February 2020, Curtis was found guilty in a shortened trial and sentenced to 5 years in prison based on his confession. He stated that he wanted to change what happened and that what he did would stay with him for a long time, for the rest of my life. A motion for a new trial was filed by Mark's defense on the grounds that the conviction was inconsistent with the strength of the evidence, and was also based on other arguments. The trial judge disagreed with Mark and denied the motion. Mark is currently serving a death sentence in the Florida State Penitentiary. He also expressed regret and apology to Teresa's family after the end of the court hearings. Friends, write your opinion in the comments, and also subscribe to the channel and watch my other videos. Thank you all.